So I'm going to contribute in two parts. Firstly and briefly, it's about time that the mileage rates went up to 55p. It reflects the obvious truth that the cost of getting about has become more expensive and these real costs must be covered. So I welcome this measure insofar as it goes, but would observe that it would have been much better had the rates been indexed for future years so as to avoid these cliff edge effects. And I also support the support for our hard-working lorry drivers. I know from personal experience when I used to run trucks myself how hard it is to make a living from road transport. In fact, we paid £1 million of tax per year on 40 vehicles before a single penny in corporation tax. The taxman has the first pull on the road. But I want to turn to the generator levy, and this is just another line in taxes, fees, charges and levies that have taken the aggregate burden of taxation to new highs, pressing down on our economy and squeezing the dynamism from it. Labour thinks they're going to tax the generators, but as we all know, these levies work through and are borne by the consumer, so this bill is just adding just another layer to the cost of living. My lords, last week the lights nearly went out. For the third time this summer, Nesso broke the glass to plead generators to supply more electricity. Any electricity, at any price. They've never had to ask for a margin in the summer before. And on Friday last week, The Times reported that Britain was close to blackouts, but the scale of the crisis was hidden. So let's shine a light on that. The Times reported that staff at Nesso alleged that for multiple periods on June the 23rd, the grid fell outside safe operating limits. At the time, the grid was using all available power to meet demand, meaning that if any single one of these had failed, it would have triggered an automatic system shutdown, causing power cuts across the country. There have been other cases since. The government's impact assessment for this bill says it is not expected to have any significant macroeconomic impacts. All the boxes where the fiscal assessments would normally be written are empty. The government website tells us that the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury has read this information and, given the available evidence, concludes that it represents a reasonable view of the likely costs, benefits and impacts of the measure. My lords, as Britain sweltered, it turned out that 420 of our critical cold chain food warehouses that store half our nation's food could barely keep their contents cool enough. My lords, in Spain, when the lights went out, people on life support machines died. Indeed, if last week it wasn't for the kindness of strangers in France, the lights would indeed have gone out. If we meet them in the World Cup in 10 days' time, I wonder, well, who knows what will happen? Is this the impact the Exchequer Secretary had in mind? Because Labour has bought us a grid that is demonstrably more fragile, wholly less reliable, and significantly more expensive. It has brought our manufacturing economy to its knees with the world's highest electricity prices, and this measure will make them more expensive still. We might have expected a margin call in January when short day lengths and low winds combined with high demand for heating can cause a shock. That's expected and planned for and avoided. But not in the summer, when we're told that solar panels will make us more energy secure. So this measure will have the significant and additional and unintended consequence beyond jacking up prices. Quite simply, it makes the cost of generating electricity more expensive. So it harms the investment case for building new power stations. So we become even more reliant on the kindness of strangers. And the reason we have high prices is that supply is constrained. We have reduced the competitive tension in the market with an overly focus on renewables. And the truth is that this measure will harm the generating fleet replacement of our power stations as they wear out. The hard truth is that when the person in the Nesso control room presses the button, we need energy generators to supply. And there's nothing wrong with having power stations ticking over, but available to leap into action when the call to action is made, if the price is high enough. That's how the market works. And in these moments, given a choice of having the lights go out or paying through the nose, we need to pay up and look big. But when we are in that hole and need these people to jump to attention. Increasing the levy from 45 to 55 is biting the hand that feeds us at the very moment we are in greatest peril. This generator levy reduces the incentive for companies to participate in the break glass market unless we accept that the wholesale price is driven higher still. And my lords, I can hardly believe what I'm about to say, because I agree with the noble Lord Sicker, that this isn't the way to fix the energy market, to have even more levies. It needs reform, because crowd-pleasing price caps and rent caps such as this will never work. We need reform of the energy market to break the link with gas. But this isn't the way to do it. My lords, disincentivising the replacement of our power stations is going to lead to something worse and wholly more sinister. There are special types of power station that must be spread throughout the grid in order for it to function properly. These power stations provide grid frequency stabilisation and ensure that power matches electricity supply with the right frequency, tightly controlled around 50 Hz. In fact, keeping within 1% of that 50 Hz figure is a legal obligation for NESO. Otherwise, we will get contagious blackouts and equipment damage. So these inertial power stations have special value that must be paid for, and value that is perversely brought within the scope of this measure. My lords, we have a structural risk on our grid that there are only 2 of these special power stations north of the River Humber, and both are scheduled for closure and none for replacement. With more levies, there are less incentives to build their replacements. So this bill is laying the structural framework for the entirety of the electoral grid in our nation, which extends to Ireland, but especially in the north of England and Scotland, to fail by disincentivising the replacement of the special power stations that maintain the frequency, that protect our economy. Perhaps the noble Lord the Minister should have a word with the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury in the few days he remains in post to explain that there are, after all, plenty of consequences to this bill. In the meantime, this is where Labour's ignorant energy fundamentalism has brought us. It's not that the lights normally go out under Labour, it's that this government is legislating to ensure that they do.
My Lords, from these benches we are broadly supportive of this bill. It contains